In this video, I want to do a little bit more with some different formulas that you can use. And again, there are hundreds of formulas in Excel. So this course is not going to be able to cover every single formula, but hopefully I'll show you some, and then you can apply that knowledge to other formulas and learning the skills that you need in your position or in your class that you're working in, right? So there are hundreds of formulas that are already kind of pre-programmed in Excel. What we've been doing so far in the last videos, we made our own formula, right? We subtracted the cells I wanted to, I multiplied by 24, by 60, etc. So I can create all my own formulas, but it is nice that there are some standard ones that we can use. And if you click the formulas tab up here, they are grouped, which is helpful. So you have your auto sum feature, which has, again, some pretty common basic functions like sum, average, counting, max and min, etc. It does keep track of your recently used ones. It may have others in here as well, but I've used sum and average a lot lately. And then you have different categories. So you have financial formulas that are already in here, logical formulas, a lot of true, false there, text, date and time, lookup and reference, math and trig, and then more functions. So I like the more functions too. These include your statistical, if you're taking a stats class, for instance, engineering, cube, information compatibility. So compatibility is more for like older versions of Excel, etc. So they are grouped by category. So if you need to search something, you can kind of go in and search and see if you can find it. Another thing you can do too, which I think is also super easy, is if you click a cell, let's say I wanted to work in this cell and I hit equals, it doesn't always work, but if you start typing in what you want, Excel names things pretty nicely, like pretty intuitively. So one of the ones we're going to do now is round. So if I start typing in the word round, I see a few different functions come up here. So this doesn't always work, but again, Excel tries to be pretty intuitive in that sense. So if there's a formula that you're kind of not sure where to find it, you may even just want to try to start typing it. And then it also will, if you hover or click it, it will tell you what those things mean. So if I click round, this rounds a number to a specified number of digits. If I click round down, it will always round a number down. If I click round up, it will always round a number up, for instance. M round is actually a little bit different. It rounds to multiples. So let's say you would like all of your data to only end in, I don't know, fives. You could round to the nearest multiple of 5. I know that's a little bit unusual, but you could, right? So maybe you want everything to just be out of 5s so it's easy to work with, or out of, I don't know, 25s or something like that. That's another kind of common one. You could actually choose the multiple that you want to round to. So I can just click on those functions and read what they each are. And when I want to use it, I could then double click on it. Let's try that again. We can double click on it. There you go. And then it will kind of open up and actually let you start entering that information there. All right, so let's practice with this, and we can do it in different ways. So one thing I do want to show you, I'm going to go back to round. So it says to round the number, and then you also have the number of digits there. So this is something that you do need to know. This is in your textbook as well, so you can reference this exact breakdown at home. But the number of digits, refers to how many digits where you want to use, what place value that you want to use there. So if I just want to do an example, again, without touching kind of my document yet, let's say I want to round the number 1,754.672. And I'm going to put a comma. I'm going to tell it how many digits to use. So how Excel interprets this is if you put in 0, it means the nearest whole. So by digits, they mean how many decimal places, really. So if I hit 0 here, it will round that number to the nearest whole. If I type in the number 1, it means that I want 1 decimal place. So it would round that number to the nearest 1 decimal place, which is the 10th position. If I type in 2 here, it means that I want it to the 2 decimal places. So I want it to the 100th position, and it will round appropriately that way as well. You can actually even use a negative number here. If I type in -1, it will go further into the whole numbers. So instead of rounding to the 1's place, it will round to the 10's place. So you're going to see it's going to round to 1750 here when I do that. So the digits part is really how many decimal places do you want, or on the negative side, how far into the ones position, the tens, the hundreds, and so on, are you going? So that's how that works there for that. All right, so let's do, again, you can keep practicing at home. So let's do a little bit of work with our document now. And I'm going to just follow along with your text. And what your text would like to do is they would actually like to round or even round up our minutes here. So you could round, for instance, to the nearest minute, or maybe you'd like to round up to the nearest, further minute. Like if I have, I don't know, 0.4 minutes, I want to count that as a full minute, just for record keeping purposes. Maybe that's a better way to compute that. So how do we go ahead and do this rounding? There's different ways that you can do it, but you could even do like a nested formula here. So that's the way that I'm going to show you how to do it. And again, you can also look in your text to see some other ways to do this as well. Okay, so as I was saying, I would like to round this column up to the nearest whole minute. So instead of being 20.6 minutes, I'd like it to just say 21 minutes. Or this one, instead of saying 27.7, I would really like this to say 28 minutes. Now you could do a few different things. One thing you could do is you could add a new column. So I can insert another column that has the rounded values there as well instead. So I can kind of see both of them if I prefer to. Or maybe I don't really want this intermediary column. It's not necessary, and I just want it to round it right away. So as I was saying, you can do this different ways, and I like to just do it as a nested kind of function here, where you can put one function inside of another. So I'm going to go back in here and kind of start over and clear this out for a second. I'm going to start with the equal sign, and I want to round this up. So I'm going to start typing round up. I'm going to double click it. Now, instead of putting a number in like I did in my last example, I'm actually going to put in a formula. So I already have an equal sign. You don't have to put another equal sign. So I'm just going to click what I had before. I had this minus this. And actually, I'm just going to go back here and add in my parentheses. So this minus this, close my parentheses. I'm going to multiply that by 24 and multiply that by 60. So I'm just putting the original formula I had inside the round up formula. Now, don't forget, it's telling you here that the roundup also needs to be told how many digits to use. I do not want any decimal places, so I'm going to type a comma and then 0, which gives me 0 decimal places. So it's going to round to the nearest whole. And then I'm going to hit enter, and I was hoping I didn't type in anything wrong or make a silly mistake. It's easy with these formulas to miss something, right? To forget like a multiplication symbol or to forget the comma or something like that. So if it doesn't work, Excel will tell you there's an error in it, and you can go back and try again. And then now I have that value 21. And I can copy that down as well to my other cells. Again, I'm going to fill without formatting because I don't want to change my nice pattern there of gold and white in the background. And then I have my answers. So I've rounded up all those durations to the nearest minute to make that easier, which probably makes sense for this call center, right? So if you're a little over a minute, it makes sense to just count it as a full a minute of work, for instance. All right, and again, I chose to round up here, but you could use any of the round features instead. And that works fine too. As I mentioned before, you could also use that round, that M round feature. So, and using the nearest multiple. So let's say I'm doing the number, I don't know, 248, and I would like to round it to the nearest multiple of 25. So the nearest multiple of 25 here would be 250, right? Counting by 25s instead. So that's, again, another way that you can round, and you can choose to tell Excel how you want those values rounded. And then again, when you're doing the regular round features, exactly to which place value as well. How many decimal places do you want to use there? All right, other things that are nice to use, I'm just going to go through some other functions that are pretty common. The min and max functions we've seen a little bit, but min and max are really nice and helpful as well. So maybe you would like to know the maximum phone call for the day, or the minimum wait time for the day, or something like that. So you can use those max and min features here. So I'm going to go and kind of follow along with your book here. And it asks me to type in, to go to cell B5 here. So I'm just going to go ahead and cell B5. And I'm going to use the min function. And again, you can find these in other places. I like to just start typing them personally. But if you go to your formulas here, you can kind of look and find them. And this one, I believe, is under statistical. Let's see. Yeah, so it's right there. So there's your min function. So you can, again, find it other places as well. For me, most of them are pretty straightforward, the way that they're labeled. So I usually just try to start writing and see if anything comes up that I recognize. All right, so maybe I want to find the minimum value, for, let's see, the first call of the day. So what time was the first call of the day? So I'm just going to hit min. I'm going to select that min function. And then what I could do is I could just select my cells as well. So I can go ahead and just drag those down like I have been doing, which is pretty quick and easy. And when I'm ready, I hit enter. And we should see our answer there. So it tells us the first call of the day was 8 a.m., right? That would be the minimum time. So that's why that pops up. And we can also do the last call of the day. So that would be our maximum function, right? Because we want the highest time, so the maximum time. I'm going to double click that. And again, I can just select the cells, and that tends to be my preferred way to do it. Because this is really long and you're focusing on one column, another little shortcut to do this is you can use the column name. Just be careful, there's nothing else in this column besides those times for numbers, right? It's, Excel will not use the words call placed in the formula for maximum. So I don't have to worry about that, but just, double check that there's nothing else in that column that could get brought in, and you could actually select the entire column. So what you could do is you could write F:(F), which tells, and you can see it highlighted there, that Excel just to use that entire column. So that's a shortcut that you can do there as well. All right, so let's see. This one I need to fix a little bit. So it looks like the formatting is general, whereas if I go to the one above it, it was definitely a date and time format, or a time format. So let me go ahead and change this one. I'm going to go ahead and change that to time here. And then now that reads correctly, right? So our last call of the day was at 5:59 p.m. and 49 seconds. So we use that max feature there to go ahead and highlight that. All right, let's just do a little bit more work here. So other things we can do, and these we're just gonna kind of keep working with some general formulas or formulas that are pretty easy to create ourselves for right now. So maybe you want to know how long the call center was open for. So what were the total hours there? And we'll do it based on call time, right? So we can do it based on that. So what I could do here is I could go ahead and hit equals, and I would want to subtract these two values, right? I want to know how many hours have passed during this time. So I can hit this cell minus this cell. Now, just keep in mind when I do that, again, you get that weird answer like we did initially and when we started doing some calculations with times. So I would really like this to not look like that. I would like this to be in a general format. So I'm going to change it from time to general, and then I'm going to multiply that by 24 because I would like this to be in hours. So if you're multiplying by 24, you get your answer in hours there. And again, I'm just going to fix that formatting. It didn't clear in. So I have 9.9969444 as my answer here. And then we can go ahead and change this. We can change this to a number. We can round this how we like. So if I want to change it to a number, it'll round that to 2 decimal places for me. And it was open for 10 hours. Maybe I want to know how many calls that we received. So I really like to know, right, how many rows, how many cases were placed that day. I want to count up how many. So that formula is very common. It is the count formula. So the count formula will count up basically sort of how many different cells I'm highlighting. So I'm going to go ahead and just select those different cases here. I'm just going to scroll right down. I hit enter, and then I should see my answer up top. Oh, let's try that again. Oh, actually, you know what? I should have selected. Let's try that again. So you have to be a little careful here, and I made this mistake too. I was going too fast, so always check your formulas. So this count feature counts the number of cells that contain numbers, and I wasn't paying attention, and I counted my cases. Now, case 50127, it does contain a number, but it's not labeled as a number cell, right? It has the word case in it, so it wasn't counting it correctly. So what I can do if I want to use the count feature, then I'm going to have to click something that has numbers in it instead. So maybe I'll select my hold times. And again, this is just one way to do it. There's lots of ways that you can do answer this question, right? All right, and then I get the 511. And again, there's different count features. If I use count A, for instance, this counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. So this would count words and things. So again, you could count in different ways. You just want to be careful. The count feature counts numbers. Count A will count any cells. So you can be a little careful there. Just like me, I made a mistake. I picked the wrong one, or I picked the wrong column, and you just go back and fix it. And then finally, maybe one of the calls per hour. So we had 511 calls over 10 hours. So what I could do there is I could set my equal sign, click the 511, divide it by that 10, and go ahead and hit enter. And again, here I get 51.1156187. So at this point, if I don't mind that many decimals, I can go ahead and leave it. I can choose to round. I could change this to a number feature, which rounds to 2 decimal places automatically. And you do want to be a little careful with how many decimal places you do use. So there's no sense in having like 5 or 6 decimal places if they're not necessary, especially if your beginning values don't have that many decimal places. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb. If the data that you're working with, the original raw data, only has 2 decimal places, then you don't really need to have answers that are typically much longer than that, right? It may not make sense. So you want to think about the data that you're using. A lot of times people refer to what are called significant digits and kind of be consistent with that. So if a value has 4 significant digits, then it would use 4 significant digits for its answer. What is a significant digit? So if I have a number like 405.2, for instance, this has 4 significant digits, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I give you a number instead, like 0.004052, this also has 4 significant digits. So those leading zeros there, even though they are important, they don't count as a significant digit. So we're actually looking for like more information there. So this one also has 4 significant digits. So sometimes people will use significant digits instead, or they may use a consistent kind of rounding method that they like to use, depending on which project that we're working on. I know in stats, a lot of times we use 1 extra decimal place than the original data. That tends to be a standard for statistics, is if we have our data that has 1 decimal place, I may give you answers with 2 decimal places, but we don't really need anything beyond that. So you would do what's reasonable for your document and for your data when you're rounding and deciding how many decimal places to go ahead and use there.